Okay, Brother Geuka, you spoke very eloquently of the 1 million conscious black voters. And I mean, you went thorough. You left no stone unturned. But you did also speak on the contributors. And elaborate to us on that.
I'll be happy to, Brother Ali. The contribution side of the 1 million conscious black voters and contributors is critically important. As I mentioned previously or touched on, black people typically and normally and under usual circumstances will vote or can be persuaded to vote. But that's mostly all that is expected of us in the political arena or in the arena of influencing public policy. We occasionally, but to no substantial extent, will also sometimes work on a particular candidate's or party's campaign, but we don't do that very much or to a great extent either. But the thing that is most important and most influential in the arena of politics is campaign contributions. That's why you always hear the parties and the candidates' campaigns announcing how much money they have raised to fund or to finance their campaign, because there is a standing contention that money is the mother's milk of politics, and we know what a mother's milk's purpose is to a baby, to a child. It's what gives that child sustenance. It's what keeps it alive. It's what enables it to grow and be strong and to grow into what it has the potential of being. So they use that term to say that money is that important. Money is as important in politics as a mother's milk is to the proper and healthy development of a child. So if black people are not contributing any money to campaigns, and they already know which candidate or which party we're going to vote for, then we are of little or no consequence in the partisan electoral arena because we're predictable. We're too predictable. So the two things that we would accomplish with the 1 million conscious black voters, of course, is that we would cease to be predictable, because we would be in a position to cast our 1 million votes for the particular candidate or party who agrees maximally to the planks in our platform. We have our own platform, just like any candidate running for office has a platform with several or more planks. We have the same thing. So what we will do, we will negotiate with any and all parties and candidates running for office and present our planks to them. And whichever of those parties and or candidates is willing to commit in writing to supporting our planks, all of which will be in the interest of the uplift and advancement and the protection nowadays of people of African descent in America. That's who can count on our support, both in terms of our votes, our 1 million votes, and whoever and however many of those voters are willing to work on particular campaigns. But most importantly, we can go to that same 1 million voters and say, okay, we're going to support candidate X in this particular election. And remember, brother, we go on the premise that there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. So who we vote for in one election may not be the same person we vote for in another one, unless that person again is willing to sign on and commit in writing to support our platform and our planks. That's what will decide which way we go. Now, once we have committed our 1 million votes and whatever number of campaign workers we choose to commit, we can also say to them, we're willing to contribute, say, $10 million to this particular candidate's campaign, in addition to giving him or her our 1 million votes. And look how simple that would be. We would simply go to our 1 million conscious black voters and contributors and say, we need $10 apiece from each of you. The $10 is not going to hurt any one of those individual members of the 1 million. but cumulatively it's $10 million. When have you ever heard of the black community or any group of black people contributing that amount of money or money in anywhere in the range of the millions to any candidate or to any party? They don't even expect it from us. And keep in mind, the $10 and the 10 million was an arbitrary amount. We could just as soon and just as easily go to the same 1 million and say, we want you to put up $15 a piece so that we can entice the candidate with $15 million in addition to our 1 million solid votes. Or we can make it 25. In other words, that's our choice. And even if we went to, say, the 25 or even 50, it is relatively painless to the caliber of black people that we're talking about comprising this solid voting block and contributing block of 1 million of the best and brightest minds and the strongest hearts and the strongest intestinal and testicular fortitude that we can find amongst our people. We can do this. We will do this. We will win. And for the first time in the history of people of African descent in this country, we will be dealing with the powers that be in this country from a position of strength rather than weakness and dependency.
Okay, Baba Gay, you spoke eloquently of the contributors to the 1 million conscious black voters. And as usual, you left no stone unturned. But I'm sure there are some brothers and sisters out there who are what you would call fence strappers. And they know what you're saying is correct, but it's new territory. And that is detrimental to us of making that move. What would you say to those fence straddlers that know what you're saying is correct, and what would you say to them to bring them in?
I would probably say, hold on, we're coming. The cavalry is on the way. But it's not yet time for those people, for whatever their reason may be, that they are in fact on the fence, to join on and become a part of this. Keep in mind, brother, what we're looking for at this point is that 1 million who are already of the caliber and mindset that we're looking for. We're not looking for converts at this point in time, nor are we looking for people who have to be convinced or persuaded either of the correctness of what we're doing or of its potential for success. The doubting Thomases and Thomasinas, the fence straddlers, if you will, the folks who don't like to make a commitment until after everything has been proven or demonstrated. As the saying goes, people who don't want to help you push the wagon to get it rolling, but who want to jump on board once it's built up a head of steam and you can just go along for the ride. We know that at some point in time there are going to be others. This 1 million number is destined to grow beyond 1 million, but it will take the first 1 million to demonstrate what we have to demonstrate in order for the fence straddlers and the doubting Thomases and Thomasinas to get up enough gumption, enough intestinal and testicular fortitude, as I referenced before, to join with us. So they will come on board, but they're not the caliber of people that it would take to get a movement of this scale and scope up and running. So we're only looking at this point for those who are already ready for prime time, as I like to say it. We're not looking for the doubters, the fence straddlers at this point in time. We ain't mad at them because we understand. Remember, we're satisfied, or we'll be satisfied if we can get our 2%. And that 2% will constitute about 1 million of our people. But the key to understand is 1 million of the best and brightest. And let me expand on that issue of the best and brightest for a moment, especially in terms of the question that you asked. Let me use the sports metaphor where they use the term blue chip athletes to describe those individual athletes in whatever the given sport is who are the absolute best at that particular sport. And every year, major so-called colleges and universities scour all of the high schools around the country looking for the most outstanding athletes, especially for football and basketball, because those are the biggest revenue generating professional sports and college level sports in the country. Football and basketball, in that order, generate billions of dollars every year for colleges and universities, and eventually, of course, for the professional leagues. Now, of course, these people are only interested in the very best athletes to either play football or to play basketball, as the case may be. And who tend to be the very best athletes produced in America, especially in those two sports? They are athletes of African descent. There was a time, and I remember it because I'm old enough to remember, I was here when it was going on, when the historically black colleges and universities in America actually functioned as, without the title, a farm system for both the NFL and the NBA. That's the National Football League and the National Basketball Association. In other words, the best blue chip football and basketball players to be found in America's colleges were playing their sports in the historically black colleges and universities, the Gramblings, the Florida A&M, the Southerns, the Tennessee States, the Bethune-Cookmans, et cetera, et cetera. And everybody knew that. And they would literally be rated every year by the professional leagues because they knew that that's where the best athletes were. Well, fast forward to integration. And the government presumably forced the traditionally white colleges and universities, especially those that were big football and basketball powers like Alabama on the football side and Kentucky on the basketball side, to allow blacks to come and play their sport at those previously all-white universities. Well, what happened? Once our blue chip, and of course these people are not going to recruit the lesser athletes, they're going to recruit the very best, the ones who used to go and play at the historically black colleges and universities. Now all of a sudden, they're the apple in the eye of America's so-called prestigious football and basketball powers. And so the black athletes who were the best athletes now have a choice. Are they still going to go to the HBCU and ply their trade in relative obscurity? Or are they going to go to one of these major colleges and universities with a major program where they know they're going to get a lot of publicity, going to get provided with a lot of white girls, to make them feel, special and that sort of stuff. So that's what happened. So now, for example, the very best athletes that black people produce ply their trade in traditionally white colleges and universities whose only use for them is for their sports acumen and skill and ability. Whereas the HBCUs now have to settle for what's left over after these white universities and colleges pick the best that we have. In other words, we no longer have the best and brightest and most outstanding black athletes that our race produces playing for our own historically black colleges and universities. Switch over now to the realm of human activity. The same thing happens. For example, I don't know whether you're aware of it or not, but the former president of Florida A&M University was really forced out of his position because he had developed a talent for recruiting the best and brightest, what are referred to as merit scholars that black people were producing. In other words, Dr. Humphreys, who is the gentleman I'm referring to, would scout the brightest academic students, black students, around the country the same way that schools tend to scout for athletes. He applied the same premises and principles to seeking out black merit scholars. And he did such an effective job that he out-recruited the Harvards, the Yales, the Browns, the Stanfords, all of those people. And they all ganged up on Dr. Humphreys because they were not able to get their quota, as it were, of these black merit scholars so as to meet their criteria for qualifying for the federal funds that they received because of their so-called diversity programs. They would get federal money in return for having black merit scholars attend their university. They didn't want run-of-the-mill black students. They wanted the best, again, and brightest academic students, just as they wanted only the best and fastest and strongest black athletes. So Dr. Humphreys was a better recruiter of black merit scholars than they were, and they fired the man because they claimed he was denying these prestigious colleges and universities their share, their rightful share, as though they had a right to them, of the black merit scholars that were being produced by black people in this country. That's the kind of insanity that we have going on in this country where race is concerned. What our movement, the 1 million conscious black voters and contributors, seeks to do is for the first time to divert or to allow for the diversion of the best and brightest black people in this country away from being in the continual and constant and all-consuming service of the system of white racism and white supremacy and racism, or racism and white supremacy, as the case may be. In other words, the best and brightest people that we produce, intellectually and otherwise, are employed in service to the maintenance and strengthening of the system of racism and white supremacy in this country. What the 1 million conscious black voters and contributors seeks to do is to gather those folk, or at least 1 million of them, and have them devote their time, energy, talents, and abilities to making the most of that $1 trillion plus a year that goes through black people's hands by developing our own internal systems of economic viability so that we become competitive with everybody else in this society, including but not limited to people of European descent. Because as you know, brother, your president's recent announcement that he is pushing for, in effect, amnesty for all of the so-called illegal aliens who have entered this country over the past 20 or 30 years. He mentioned a figure of something like 11 million. I don't know where he got his numbers, but the numbers are actually up around 30 million of so-called illegal aliens, people who are in this country from south of the border for the most part, who are here illegally. Now, he praises those people because they are not troublemakers, they're hardworking, etc., etc. Well, brother, if you and I were illegally in this country or in any country, we'd be kind of quiet too and kind of accepting of whatever it is that the people are willing to let us have as a means of allowing us to stay there, which obviously is a better place for us to be than wherever we came from, or we wouldn't have left home to come to this place. So what is happening, my friend, is that your president and his handlers are setting African Americans up for a fall because those people are intended to be our replacements in every way. And once those people are no longer here illegally because they will have granted them citizenship, there will no longer be a need for them to be quiet and to accept low-paid jobs that nobody else, including black folks, are willing to get paid for the work that we're required to do. And they will no longer need black people any more so than, as you recall from the history of this country, when the Native Americans, as they were called, failed to measure up to what the Europeans had in mind for them in terms of being a slave labor class in this country. That's what their intent was. And the Indians wouldn't cooperate for a whole bunch of reasons. So when they wouldn't cooperate and accept being slaves or turned into slaves for a whole bunch of reasons, they came to be of no use or value in this country, and in fact, they were exterminated. The estimates of how many Native Americans were in this land when the Europeans came here ranges from as low as 10 million to as high as 100 million, depending upon your source of information. So let's split it down the middle and say there were about 50 million Native Americans here when the Europeans arrived. Today, according to numbers that I looked up just recently, there is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.7 Native Americans who are supposedly pure Native American and 2.4 million mixed Native American with other, whether it's mixed with white people or with black people or somebody else. So you've got around 5 million left out of what at one time was no less than 50 million. They exterminated those people. And to replace them in the scheme of things as the laboring class without compensation, they set up this system which we come to know as the transatlantic slave system, and brought Africans over here and forced our ancestors to labor without compensation. So something is going on here that people of African descent in America need to wake up to and realize sooner rather than later, and join forces with us in this 1 million conscious black voters and contributors movement, so that we remove ourselves from the position of abject vulnerability to whatever the whimsy might be of these evil people. They've already started to send us the message of what they have in mind for us by allowing their police forces to shoot and kill, in other words, murder black people, especially young black males, without any consequence. Without any consequence. In fact, when you put somebody on a paid suspension or paid leave, that's a vacation. In my book, I'll take one of those any day. So instead of being punished for murdering black people, police are actually rewarded, and then eventually, of course, the charges against them are thrown out and they're put back on the job to kill again. So it is important for people of African descent, especially if they are thinkers, and if they have commitment to the uplift and advancement and the protection of our own people, especially our children, they need to join with us in this 1 million conscious black voters and contributors so that we can strengthen ourselves and be in a position to deal with the purveyors of this system from a position of power and not weakness. Those among the black clergy class who would otherwise qualify as conscious black. So just as we're seeking 1 million conscious black voters and contributors, I would certainly hope that among those 1 million would be any number of conscious black men of the cloth and women, let's say conscious black clergy. I would like to think, though I have no proof of it, that perhaps there is gradually an increasing number among them who are becoming race conscious and perhaps even beginning to embrace what has come to be known as liberation theology, such as Reverend Jeremiah Wright, for example, up in Chicago, who used to be the pastor of your president. So hopefully there would be more of that caliber to be found among the black clergy class, and they would see fit to bring their talent, skills, and perhaps even some of their congregants into the fold. That would be the righteous thing for them to do. And in effect, it would put them in a similar vein as we know, for example, to be the situation with the Jewish synagogues. In fact, it is the Jewish synagogue that is the center and the heart of what keeps the Jewish community intact as a community. It is the Jewish synagogue and the schools that the synagogues create that makes sure that during the formative years, virtually every Jewish child attends a Jewish school, so that there's no ability of any outside or foreign or alien influences to interfere with the development of those young people. It is said by the sociologists and others of that ilk that the first 13 to 15 years of a human being's life are the formative years, that at least 90% of what that human being's worldview and self-concept is going to become is formed in the first 13 to 15 years of life. That also corresponds to the first 8 years of formal education in America. So you will notice that most Jewish children attend Jewish schools until they graduate from 8th grade, which is usually around the age of 14, give or take. And then they are subjected to a rites of passage. For Jewish boys, it's called bar mitzvah. For Jewish girls, it's called bat mitzvah. And it's a rites of passage that basically is a confirmation that they have internalized all of the teachings that they have received primarily through their synagogue and the schools that are run by the synagogues and that are reinforced within the family unit. See, we have not had that because our churches have virtually no racial focus at all. So whereas the Jewish synagogue is the very means by which Jewish people are strengthened in their Jewishness, the black church has been AWOL in terms of its responsibility to provide that kind of orientation and grounding for our children. So our children are cast into the arms and into the coffers, if you will, of the enemy at increasingly early ages. It used to be that they would start school at kindergarten, which was around 5 years old, but now, as you know, our children are going to preschools as young as 2 years old, and they're going to daycare centers as early now, as I understand, 6 months. Someone told me it was now 3 months. I don't know about the 3 months, but I do know, I have confirmed that there are children being sent to preschools or daycare centers now as early as 6 months. When is that child ever going to bond with its mother? If at that early stage they're already being sent out to be handled and perhaps even mishandled by people who are of no kinship to them. So we have to have our clergy class, or at least an element among them, who would constitute within the clergy class the same sort of thing that our 2% that Jim Klingman and I are seeking will constitute in terms of the whole 45 million. So I'm hopeful that there will be a reasonable number and percentage to be found among the black clergy class of whatever religion or denomination of a religion they may be, who will prioritize their commitment to their people in much the same way as we take it for granted and applaud the Jews for doing.
Appreciate that, Bubba. In closing, would you mind giving the people information of how they can get in contact with you, how they can get in contact with the organization, and what do you have for the future?
By all means, Brother Ali, I would urge anyone viewing this videotape to visit our campaign website. That website is www.iamoneofthemillion.com. www.iamoneofthemillion.com. And there you will find all the information that has to do with explaining who we are, why we exist, what it is we're seeking to do, how we intend to proceed or are proceeding to go about the business of doing it, what we intend to accomplish in what time frame. Now, there's a lot of background information to what you will find on that website, on my personal website, and on Jim Klingman's personal website. My website is www.amefika.com. That's www.amefika.com. And Jim Klingman's website is www.blackonomics.com. Again, www.blackonomics.com. But the most important place that we would want people to visit is the campaign's own website. That's www.iamoneofthemillion.com. And if you like what you see there and you feel that you are one of the million, then we want you to order your promotional t-shirt, because that is the way that we are seeking to generate the revenues that will be needed to conduct this campaign. We've already talked about how important money is to traditional electoral politics, it being the mother's milk of politics. Well, it's no less important to this campaign, because everything has to be paid for, everything that we do. Here to date, Jim Klingman and I have been fronting the money for anything that has to be done that has to do with this campaign. And our single source vendor who is producing and providing the t-shirts for us has had to advance his own personal money in order to be able to generate the first, shall we say, stock of promotional t-shirts that we are now offering for sale to the people who register to become a part of the 1 million conscious black voters and contributors. But in closing, let me urge people to visit our campaign website. Is www.iamoneofthemillion.com.
Thank you.
You're welcome.